Today we will be discussing the 7 societal contexts in which to apply the Catholic social teaching principles. The family is foundational, and so also the sacrament of marriage, on which it is based because it is the original and the most influential context into which human life is born and formed, and the most fundamental constituent of local communities, societies, and the state. Thus, it is the culture of every person's origin and the building block and conduit of all forms of culture and community. As noted, the family is the most intimate and caring social unit, imparting not only psychological and social stability, but also moral and religious teaching and practice. Therefore, it is incumbent on all Christians not only to care for their own families, but also for the structure, stability, and the welfare of all families within society. In view of this, the Church recognizes the family to be the most foundational social structure and sees the proper rearing of children, the bringing of new transcendent eternal life into the world, as its most important purpose. Thus, the family and the proper rearing of children provides the basis on which the Church defines marriage and sexual mores. Yes, the Church derives its definition of marriage and sexuality from Jesus, but these teachings are seen within the context of the stability and proper functioning of the family. Hence, it should come as no surprise that the Church sees Jesus' teaching about the indissolubility of marriage within the context of providing a stable, loving, moral, and religious family in which to raise children. So the centrality of family and the raising of children goes beyond the ideal of indissolubility to issues such as having one male father and one female mother, the exclusivity of marital partners, and even the openness to children within marriage. So what must Christians do to uphold and promote the family within the society? Number one, enter into marital relationships with the intention of exclusive and indissoluble commitment to each spouse and to be open to bearing and raising children. Number two, provide an example to friends and community of good marriage and the raising of children. Third, practice and uphold Jesus' and the Church view of exclusive, indissoluble marriage and the proper place of sexuality within it. 4. To use the principle of subsidiarity to protect the autonomy and dignity of the family within the larger social context. And the last, to help other families with advice, friendship, and other forms of support. The working environment. The Old Testament, Jesus, Saint Paul, and the Church all attests to the importance and dignity of work in our temporal and even spiritual lives. Using one's gifts, time, and talents create and produce goods and services to help sustain the lives of others in the community is intrinsically good and an integral part of life's purpose. Pope Pius XI and Pope John Paul II elaborated what might be called a constitution of the rights and duties of labor and laborers. They address the following four major issues. Number one, the dignity of work, including the proper relationship between labor and capital, and the proper relationship between labor and private property. Number two, the right to work, including the role of the state in promoting it, the proper relationship between family and work, and the rights of special groups like children, women, immigrants, and agricultural workers. Third, the right of workers, including just remuneration, humane working conditions, and the right to organize, and the right to strike. And fourth, solidarity among workers, including the importance of unions and other labor associations. The economic or business community. There are countless dimensions of economic analysis that must be subject to the scrutiny of ethical, particularly those that affect competitiveness among firms, humane wages, prices of inelastic goods, accessibility of credit, and several other areas. Economic laws are designed to find the most efficient ways of doing things, but these efficiencies can, as the Industrial Revolution showed us, the incredibly exploitative toward workers, the poor, and those without political influence. These gray areas considerable ethical scrutiny, which incited the Church to provide some basic guidelines. So the compendium summarizes the intent of these guidelines as follows. Just as in the area of morality, one must take the reasons and requirements of the economy into account, so too, in the area of the economy, one must be open to the demands of morality. In the economic and social realms, too, the dignity and complete vocation of the human person and the welfare of society as a whole are to be respected and promoted, for man is the source, the center, and the purpose of all economic and social life. Though the Church uses different language to speak about stakeholder analysis, it covers all of its major points. 1. Business owners have an obligation to serve the interests not only of the shareholders, but also those who contribute to and are affected by it. Number 2, business owners are responsible not only for establishing the most efficient means of production and the increase of profits, but also for guaranteeing the personal dignity and rights of all those who work for it or relate to it. Third, civil authorities have a right to tax and impose regulation on private enterprises in order to prevent exploitation, provide social goods, protect competition, and assure fair practices to customers, employees, and other stakeholders. 4. Private non-profit organizations are essential to supplying social goods to the needy, as well as education and spiritual goods for citizens. The state should observe the principle of subsidiarity and allow private non-profits the space to raise funds and to provide social, educational, and religious goods as they see fit to enhance the lives and spirits of citizens. The political community. Catholic social teaching begins with the cornerstone of political community, the individual, social, transcendent human being. The compendium states it as follows. The human person is the foundation and purpose of political life. Endowed with a rational nature, the human person is responsible for his own choices and able to pursue projects that give meaning to life in the individual and social level. In a democracy, the will of the political community is determined by a plebiscite or by representational government whose officials are elected. This has the good effect of allowing the will of the people to determine the common good for the nation. Remarkable as democracy is, it has one major drawback. It is not necessarily based on the will of all people, but rather the majority of the people. This leaves those in the minority in a vulnerable position because even in the best democracy, the majority could abuse, marginalize, or ostracize people who are in a minority position. These minorities could be ethnic minorities, religious minorities, socioeconomic minorities, and political minorities. So how can they be protected? So the political community's responsibilities do not just stop at protecting and promoting the inalienable rights of its citizens. It is also responsible for promoting the common good among them. This means providing social goods such as roads, water, police protection, defense for all individuals within its boundaries, taking special care to protect the rights of everyone equally. Thus, the political community must guarantee an atmosphere where every individual has access to the necessities of life, education, dignified work, and entrance to the free market so that he can exercise his creativity, personal initiative, and practical efforts to sustain and enhance himself, his family, his community, and his religion. The international community. The international community is a juridical community founded on the sovereignty of each member state without bands of subordination that deny or limit its independence. Understanding the international community in this way does not in any way mean relativizing or destroying the different and distinctive characteristic of its people, but encourages their expression. So in order to promote international cooperation, to avoid war and unnecessary disputes, and to avoid prejudice and marginalization based on prejudice, it is necessary to have a body of international law and some international legal structures to facilitate cooperation among states without interfering with their sovereignty. These international laws and legal structures should support the natural law on international cooperation, which is of higher significance than the internal laws of any particular state. The compendium describes this as follows. Universal respect of the principles underlying a legal structure in conformity with the moral order is a necessary condition for the stability of international life. The principle of intrinsic transcendent dignity of every individual and the principle of solidarity requires that all nations, as well as citizens having influence and means, cooperate and contribute to the overcoming of worldwide poverty and to development within substantially undeveloped nations. The degree of cooperation among the nations depends on the resources, expertise, and capital available for these efforts beyond the reasonable needs of the nation itself as determined by its citizens. It is incumbent on governmental agencies, non-governmental organizations, and social entrepreneurs to set aside time, expertise, and resources to make these contributions to global development where and when they have access. At the very least, special provision should be made to help developing nations gain access to free markets and to subsidized loans for infrastructure and the business incubation. Furthermore, provisions should be made to provide essential needs for the impoverished and above all the highest degree of education attainable. Creative efforts should be made to share education through distance technologies, shared infrastructure for new technologies, and to share administrative experts with developing countries. Without the solid educational, technological, and administrative foundation, along with the promotion of solid legislative and juridical framework, access to free markets and low-cost loans will be at best fictitious and at worst a road to further indentured servitude to wealthier nations.